Hello, this is the Provoked Prawn, and in this video I want to talk to you about why your friends are wrong, or more importantly, why you shouldn't listen to people that tell you how to put your cooler in a certain position, and if you do it this way you're doing it wrong. Now, I have mounted quite a few different all-in-one coolers in a variety of sizes, 240mm, 280mm, 360mm, even 420mm, and you'll see one behind me in the Lee Air Mini, which is mounted on the back of the case with its tubes pointing towards the middle. And this is the bit of controversy that you'll often hear, because people have watched the Gamers Nexus video on how to mount your rad and haven't listened to it properly or don't understand the concept. Now, in this video that I'll link to in the description, he basically explained about the logic of how the rad works, and all-in-one coolers obviously have liquid inside them that is then pumped around in order to keep it cool. This part sits on your CPU and then the liquid flows through. The problem becomes that over time the pump will wear out, so the pump inside this bit will wear out and could potentially cause problems. You also have an issue where at some point over time, because obviously the liquid inside is getting quite hot, some of it will escape naturally through the tubes and through other parts, not in terms of leaking, but it will gradually lose some of the liquid that's in there that then could present problems. And the problem comes when air gets inside the pump, because if it's not basically kept lubricated by the liquid inside, it could potentially become an issue. Now, with certain mounting positions for the radiator, you can potentially cause issues, because when there's less liquid in the system, there will naturally be air bubbles, and if those air bubbles end up in the pump, that causes problems. And the reason why the orientation could be an issue is if the air managed to escape from the radiator, for example, and gets into the pump, then you've got a problem. Now, one of the biggest complaints, one of the biggest recommendations that people will have is not doing this. So if you mount a radiator to the bottom of your case and then have the pump mounted in the middle, you are, excuse the finger marks, you are potentially putting this at the highest point, and then any air bubbles will naturally rise, because that's what will happen, and as they go through the system they'll end up in here, and that will potentially damage the pump. So the one thing that you do want to avoid is installing the radiator at the bottom of your case and then having the all-in-one cooler, so the CPU is cooled by the pump at a higher point than where the radiator is, at the highest point in your case. So this is potentially a problem. Definitely don't do this unless you have a dedicated liquid cooled system with a hard liquid cooled system where you have an actual pump reservoir combo, where it is a much better pump system and it isn't crammed inside this sort of cooling block, then it won't be an issue. But what you'll often see is people recommending that you don't do this, where you essentially have this mounted on the front of the case, for example, and then the CPU block there, or that you don't do, as I've done in the case behind me, sideways mount it, so it's like that. Ignore how the tubes are bent, but the point is here, the height of where the pump is. Now, if somehow you manage to mount it like this, so that it's on the side or front, and the CPU pump block is higher up than the radiator, then that's still problematic. But in most cases you'll find that even if you mount it on the front of the case, they will still have, the pump will be lower than the top point, and the air will naturally end up at the highest point, and so you won't find that it'll escape into the pump as easily. There is obviously still a chance that you'll end up with air bubbles in here, but generally the pump will be pushing the liquid through the system into the radiator, and the air will probably end up trapped at the top here in top of the radiator. So a lot of people mistake the advice as basically having the tubes down and having it mounted like this, which obviously you can do if you want to, but again, the issue is not the direction that the radiator is facing, although obviously the air will then get trapped up here instead, same sort of logic, and that then it can't flow through the tubes. But essentially, basically, you just don't want to mount it in that way. Now, you can top mount your radiator instead, because obviously note that the CPU block isn't the highest point here, and you can obviously side mount it, as I've said, as I have done, And I am happy to report that I have done this quite a while. I had this, funnily enough, Z73 radiator installed on my Lee Dynamic XL for quite some time, and this still works. I've only taken it off because I replaced it with a white one because I like the white aesthetic more. But this is perfectly fine, and it was mounted like this for well over a year without any problems on my main gaming PC that I use daily, all day long, and into the night for editing videos and other things, and it still works fine. It's not noisy, the pump has no problems, can hear the liquid still inside, there's not excessive amounts of air in there, and there's no issues with it. And so you don't need to worry. Basically, make sure it's not like this, and that is the end of it. This has been the Provoked Prawn. Thanks for watching. This has been the Provoked Prawn. Hope you found this video useful, interesting, hilarious, or otherwise. Take a look at these other videos that I think you might find interesting as well. And have a look at the description for links and other information you might find useful. Click that join button to see the benefits of being a member of my YouTube channel. And most importantly, have a great life.